Okay, good afternoon again. This is Jesse Dahl. I just orient you a little bit to the GoToTraining software that we're going to be using for this meeting. At the moment, I've muted all attendees in the interest of keeping clean audio for our presenter. However, we're not discouraging your input. You can use the chat feature, which is down on the lower section of your GoToMeeting toolbar. If you type a message there, you can send that to one of the organizers, and we'll be happy to address your question or comment. So please feel free to do that. Thank you all for answering the brief questions in the poll. In just about 30 seconds, I'm going to turn off that poll and introduce our presenter for today. So on your screens, you should see the results from the poll. Looks like the vast majority of you that are attending this meeting have not submitted a proposal, so you are definitely in the right place. Our team, the ERG, which is the Eastern Research Group, SDWIS Prime Transition Team, comprised of Global Environmental Consulting, CADMIS, and ERG, is prepared to help you through the process of completing and submitting an Exchange Network grant with the purpose of transitioning to SDWIS Prime, CMDP, or general modernization of your data systems. Our presenters for today are Laura Hardesty from the CADMIS Group and Mike Corbin from Global Environmental Consulting. At this time, I'm going to turn the presenter role over to Laura Hardesty, who will show her screen and walk us through the process of submitting an Exchange Network grant proposal. Laura?
Good afternoon, everyone. Give me 1 second while I show my screen. You see my? Okay, awesome. Okay, good. I know most of you, but again, my name is Laura Hardesty with CADMIS, and we gave some thought about what it's going to take to transition, and one of the most effective tools you can have is financing. And so the Exchange Network guidance is out now for 2017. And so we thought, well, if we can help you through this at all, we will. And so what you're going to see is this presentation that I put together. It is largely based on the solicitation notice. And I did attend the two grant call-in sessions where you could call in and ask questions, and where the grant team gave a presentation. But by and large, this is going to be geared towards SDWIS Prime, and this is basically just our ideas based on the solicitation notice and what it may take to submit a successful grant application. This is also geared towards a more general audience. Obviously, there will be things specific to your primacy agency that we don't know, but I will try to point those out throughout this presentation. And so with that, if there are no questions, I'll go ahead and begin. And I just want to let you know that we are recording this session as well. Okay, so I picked out some highlights from the two webinars, but the main thing for the drinking water community is that CMDP and SDWIS Prime are funding priorities, and from all indications, they appear to be high priorities. But time is short because the applications are due November 18th. So there is not much time. Individual grants for $300,000, partnership grants up to $500,000. A partnership grant requires a lead agency. A lead agency is usually a Department of Environmental Quality or Department of Health, and the partners are other entities in other states or tribes, but not within the same state. So a partnership grant is probably not going to be awarded if you apply from both your, for instance, your Department of Health or your Department of Environmental Quality. That's not what they mean by a partnership. The partnership is expected to be basically, the easy way to think of it is outside the state. The exception may be in certain cases where a university or something like, or a nonprofit like that might be involved. If you're interested in doing that, I would check with your regional grants coordinator or the contacts for the solicitation notice. There is a checklist in Appendix H. Now, I notice I say follow that carefully for a successful application. Appendix H, it's kind of a long checklist, but please don't be intimidated by it, because somebody somewhere in your agency has the answers that you need for this. We're not going to know until April. April, they'll announce either a selection or a pre-selection. So we get to gear up to do all of this, and then we get to wait a while. The grant award is effective July 1, 2017, and it's for 3 years. This is important because that 3-year time period is important to your application, because the evaluators want to see a specific project with outcomes and something that you've identified, whatever it is, that has a term of 3 years. Throughout this presentation, I'll have some references to specific pages or appendices that are listed in the solicitation notice. I added that specifically so if you want to see where I came by the information, you can look at the specific page in the solicitation notice. But hopefully this will give you a shortcut, because the solicitation notice is pretty big. So to start with then, we're going to talk about some standard milestones, but we're not going to talk about them as milestones. The terminology that's very important to your grant application is goals and outcomes, not milestones, not other, project management or terms that you may have heard to organize your work or, define something. We're going to talk about things in terms of goals and outcomes. So first off, a couple of the examples that apply to all EPA information systems in some regard. Testing and implementing XML schema. Most of the drinking water data managers, every one of them probably, are familiar with these terms. A national database that's available for testing, that's probably right now is going to be CMDP, and later this year our sandbox instances of SDWIS Prime. The third term I picked out of there was the shared ProMare services, because one of the basic premises of the Exchange network is to share and reuse components. Shared ProMare services is specifically identified as something that you can integrate into adopting CMDP. On page A21, I picked out, of course, for this presentation, the SDWIS specific activities. And this is right out of the solicitation notice. SDWIS state to SDWIS Prime transition, adoption and deployment of CMDP, two things that are very high priorities for EPA. Development of web services that consume SDWIS Prime data. Notice in red I have interfacing applications. that has been identified as a serious and grave concern to almost everyone. So that is exactly why I highlighted that in red. But the activities that support interfacing applications are very likely to be considered as part of the priority. And of course, the modification of your external business systems that interact with SDWIS Prime, especially replacing ODBC. And again, could be in direct support of interfacing applications. So remember, we talked about goals and outcomes, not milestones. These can be simple. One of your goals could be implement CMDP or transition to SDWIS Prime, as stated in the solicitation notice. And I left this a plain and simple slide because that's right. It can be as simple as that. Okay, so now we've decided we've got two pretty simple goals. The evaluators will be looking at what are your outputs for your goal. What do you need to accomplish to reach your goal? What are these steps? So the steps to reach your goal are the outputs, and they need to be concrete, definable, and they need a date. So examples are, and these are some examples not necessarily from the solicitation notice, but some things that we came up with, that our team came up with. Develop your transition planning documents. Every endeavor of this nature needs a good plan, and that's something that could be funded. A gaps analysis. Map and test the CMDP schema. And as most of you know, that schema is different from what we're traditionally used to for lab to state. Right now in testing, and I think maybe in one or two cases, maybe even close to production, is the data synchronization engine. So these are some things these are some outputs that are going to help you reach your goal. And this is just an example. I'm sure you can come up with several that are pertinent to your primacy agency, but the point is that the outputs must be something. They must be something tangible, and they must have a scheduled completion date. Now, we talked about dates early on, and that the grant period is July 1, 2018 to June 30, 2020. So each output that you include on here, whatever it is, should have a scheduled completion date, and ideally that date will be within the 3-year period of the grant. And if it's something that's going to take longer, then the plan for you or your challenge would be to identify the things that you can get done as outputs for your goal. Now, your goal may be, your goal may be I want to implement CMDP, but the reality may be I can't do it for 2 years. Then you would say, I want to develop this aspect of CMDP. Here's what I can do. Your planning document could actually have your long-term plan if it's beyond the 3 years. But the important thing is that you have outputs and goals that are tangible and that can be reached within the period of the grant. So the outcome is your end result. So in thinking ahead, after you meet these goals, what will your outcomes be? What have you achieved? And, you know, I didn't get into the whole idea of measurable results and things like that because it doesn't really say that you need to go that far, but you do need to be able to describe what you think your outcomes or your end result is going to be. And the end result, of course, is an outcome, not an end result, but it is your outcome for your grant application. The evaluators are evaluating in terms of specific terms, goals, outputs, outcomes. So your project outcome just needs to describe what was your environmental outcome. You reduce development cost after implementing reusable components. And I tried to bold the terms. Here's what I did after this outcome. This is what I did. And so here's a few of them to read through. And I mean, I'm sure there are other ways to describe this. Again, this was just something that we came up with after looking at the solicitation notice. So reduce cost and reporting burden after collaborating with partners to reuse components and shared technologies across agencies. These are all terms that you find in the solicitation notice, and they're pretty specific about the fact that those terms resonate with the evaluators. And so it's kind of important to use their terms wherever you can and not confuse the issue with terms that may mean the same thing to you. It's just best to go with what they have specified in the solicitation notice, which is what we tried to do here. So the outcome and the end result. Here's what will happen after I do this. I will be able to blank. And I probably should have said, here's what I think or expect to happen after I do this. We did have a pretty good example of a grant application that was submitted for during the last round, and so some of these examples we are borrowing from that grant application that was shared with us from one of our other primacy agencies. But this is an example of what the table can look like. It's just a pretty good template to follow. You list your goal 1, goal 2, goal 3, etc. The output, whatever the output is. Here are just some ideas to start with. I would do it just like this: goal 1, output 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, etc. Very important, the scheduled completion date. The evaluators from the guidance really want to see things that are feasible to complete within the project period. And these scheduled completion dates, you will be required to report on the progress of how you're doing. And, you know, I mean, every grant has reporting requirements, and so they're going to look at that. And down the line, if you have a great plan, but you've hit a roadblock and you can't complete it, that could affect your ability in the future. They're going to look at what your past performance has been, and that may affect how they score you. But there is a component of that during the evaluation. Now notice the outcomes. They've got a bulleted list of outcomes. So for goal 1, you don't have, it's not necessarily a one-to-one, but for goal 1, we've got 7 outcomes that we think is going to happen if we have our outputs completed by their scheduled dates. This is the goals that we think will happen. Now at the bottom, each goal, in this case goal 1, in this table must have a corresponding item in the detailed itemized budget. They're literally crosswalking during the evaluation to look at your goals and then your budget. Is your budget reasonable for those goals? So that, again, is a one-to-one correspondence, and they need to be able to connect the dots pretty easily. And that's another key point to make when you're thinking about your application, is just make it as easy as you can for the evaluators. We don't want to leave them, guessing about anything. Your detailed itemized budget. Page E5 in the solicitation notice has the key points and a very specific list of things that you need to do. It looks pretty long, but I think if you follow what is in here, line by line, make sure you can cover everything that's applicable to you, it's actually outlined very good for you. But this is an example of what, again, of what was submitted from our agency that loaned us this. And so I just tried to put a little bit of that here. So this is, oops, sorry about that. Notice over here we have goal 1. So we have, for goal 1, this is the funding, the totals, and the grant total at the end. So all of this here in the detailed itemized budget, this is specifically, I mean, this template is very specific. If you fill in the blanks, you will be fine. And so if you had more than one goal, you would just insert a row, or you would take this table and make one for goal 2. There's a couple of ways you could do it, but here's what has to be included. And again, this is just an example. Appendix G has the information about contracts and subawards. You do not have to identify subrecipients and or contractors in the grant application. So, more information about your detailed itemized budget. You have to describe both the total project budget and the costs associated with each major goal. And again, we're looking at personnel, fringe benefits, travel, equipment. And for a lot of this, I put see page E5 just because it may not specifically apply to what you're doing for SDWIS prime transition. But if you're having light food refreshments, you could just let us know. Just kidding. But there are some, much of this may not apply to what we're doing for SDWIS prime or CMDP. Now, down here at the bottom, the detailed itemized budget may also include a budget narrative. So if you have some important information about how you've derived this, or something specific to your state or primacy agency, you would want to put that in a budget narrative. But the budget narrative and the detailed itemized budget are submitted in the same area at grants.gov, and I'll show you that in just a minute. So the grant budget summary is also a summary, is included in your project and possibly also your budget narrative, but certainly your project narrative. So page 18, the budget resources and key personnel. EPA will evaluate the appropriateness, including the amount allocated to each goal and your adequacy to support the proposed work. So the point in putting this here is that they're actually going to be looking in great detail whether you've allocated too much or also too little. So you want to be as close as you can and as realistic as you can possibly get for the dollar amounts. that you're allocating. So the total budget amount for each goal in the project narrative and in a budget narrative appendix or attachment, it's going to go in maybe two places. The qualifications of the project manager and other key personnel that will do the work. So this is kind of like a summary of the resume of your project manager, your programmatic staff, other key people that will be helping. The other thing is approach, procedures, and controls to ensure that the grants funds are spent effectively. So most agencies have at least an outline or an SOP that govern how they spend their money and how they maybe control cost or things like that. This is going to be different for each agency, very likely. But they do want to see some kind of QA on how your grants are, how the funds are watched, basically, and to ensure that they will be spent efficiently and on time. And again, this gets back to that project, your project planned completion dates. So the key here, I think, is when you do your quarterly reporting, is you make sure that you include some kind of component that explains if things aren't happening the way you think they should, if they're behind, also if they're ahead of time. So this is just an example to include in the project narrative. Notice that it's goal-based and then year-based. It's really what you think you're going to spend by year for each goal. Nothing fancy, but they do want to see that budget summary. Okay, so a little bit of step-by-step about the project narrative. I just listed out the things that stood out to me in the grant application that we have from last time, and also from page E2 of the solicitation notice. Just these elements: introduction does include the reason, so the reason and why you need to do it. Again, we have to talk about project goals, outputs, and outcomes. The more that you can tie those to producing environmental results, the better. Environmental results are also in the solicitation notice. Some that are very familiar to the data managers are improving accuracy, timeliness, and completeness of reported data. That's always a good one. But more than that is, why is this good to do? So that we can improve our compliance decisions, so that we have complete information to make decisions, things like that. The roles and responsibilities of project participants. That's both the applicant, and if you're applying for a partnership, then it's all the partners. And so some things that you may want to consider are your primacy agency program staff, your IT staff, laboratory staff, any subject matter experts, not just information system subject matter experts. And, sometimes it may be beneficial to have an EPA partner. Certainly there's a lot of good information from headquarters, and even if you've worked with the developers or anything like that. But the more if you have a lot of project participants, the better, I think, in this. But again, it's for the project narrative, so it's the role and responsibility. So who's your project manager? Where are they from? Their responsibility is going to be, finalize documents, establish schedule, assign assign projects, etc., that kind of thing. This is important, and this is pretty specific in the solicitation notice. Programmatic involvement. Programmatic involvement is one of those things that we always used to kind of gripe about, because we used to kind of feel, at least back in when I was more involved as a state representative, that we kind of just thought like, well, they're not involving us. They're developing IT systems without no programmatic knowledge. So this I really do think is an attempt to address that that aspect of it. So you need to include a statement addressing programmatic involvement, and then a commitment to reusing the existing tools that are there. So you can probably find a pretty good canned statement, but those two elements they want to see in the project narrative. So then some optional things that you could include that may or may not have an effect. You could list some expected outcomes in your narrative. How using CMDP and transitioning will accomplish the following items that are listed directly from page 17. Improving timeliness, completeness, and accuracy, like I said before. Reducing burden and cost with data management. Supporting better environmental decision making. Those are optional, but they could be beneficial in your project narrative. You do have to list the budget amounts for each goal, and again, there's this little table that I had before. This is just an example, again, to include in your project narrative, but they want to see it, and again, we're tying cost to goals, and we don't want them to have to guess. So this is what I think it will be for year 1. This is what I think it will be for year 2, etc. Include a summary of the qualifications for your project manager and key personnel, like I said before, and a statement summarizing your past performance for previous grants received. So again, they will be looking at how did you do before? Did you spend all of your money? How much of your projects were completed? How many were completed on time? Did you note any issues? How did you handle your past grants? And so, for instance, if you this would be the place where you could add if you had a problem and what you did to address it, and did that remedy, did that get your project back on track, for instance. That's the kind of summarizing statement I think they would want to see. And if there is something that did not go well, this would be the place where you would address that and put a positive spin on it, if you will. I put this in here just because these are specific things in the solicitation notice that you should review your narrative after you've written it and make sure that you basically comply with these 5 things. They don't want it to be more than 10 pages. More is not necessarily better. It's how succinctly and precise you can describe what you're doing. Address all of the criteria and group like items together in your work plan. Don't include any non-work plan items. I probably should have emphasized that, italicized it or something. They just don't want to see it. So just that's why I included it there. And then they want page numbers. They don't want tiny font with you know, all the way across the page. They want the 1-inch margins and 11 or 12 point font. And then finally, again, as I've stressed throughout this whole presentation, we use goals, outputs, and outcomes. Okay, prepare the programmatic resources and personnel description. So this is an area where you can highlight your expertise and past experience from the staff. This is not included in the project narrative, and there is no page limit. Having said that, however, I'm sure that they, again, appreciate succinct and concise descriptions here. But this is where you can highlight, and this is where they want to see the education, work history, knowledge, expertise of your key people. Biographical sketches and resumes, I mean, if the resume is 20 pages long, you might pull out the relevant information. But this is going to speak to how things are being managed, and again, there is no page limit. And it's not part of your project narrative. And then finally, after you've completed the previous items that we've talked about, you prepare the cover letter. There's a very concise template on page E12. It includes these things, and that's it. I don't even think the cover letter has to be very long, but it needs to address these things, and then you're done. Executive signature of authorized organizational representative. I probably couldn't have told you who that was, but I'm sure there's a way to find that out, especially if your agency has submitted previous grants. And just a note on that, the previous grants could have been for, you know, many other environmental programs that EPA supports. And so it might be beneficial, if you haven't ever done this before, to find out, if you can in your agency, who led the effort for your other previous grants, and talk to them and see, you know, where things were signed and that kind of thing. It could jumpstart your process. Okay, so this little shot here is lifted directly off of page E7. And this is the submission instructions. What you see highlighted is the things that probably that you know, you're going to have to provide input if not right. And so that's the project narrative, the detailed itemized budget. In parentheses here, it has the budget narrative attachment form. So what I saw was that there was maybe two documents, a document that had the itemized budget and then a budget narrative document. Those could both be the same document, or that I think they could both possibly be submitted separately. But you'll probably have some input with that. If you have to find a negotiated indirect cost rate agreement, that may just be a document that your agency has, but you would have to attach it if you've included those indirect costs as part of your budget. Then, of course, we talked about programmatic resources and personnel, separate document. The cover letter is a separate document. The bottom three, well, actually number 14, unless you're part of an intertribal consortium, that probably wouldn't apply. The formal project partners' roles and responsibilities. If you are part of a partnership, then that would be important. And then number 15, federally or non-federally funded assistance agreements. If you have those, you may not. You would probably have to find out if you have those. So, but 13, 14, and 15 are really only if applicable, and 10. So, but I mean, it looks a little bit daunting, but these 15 things, while they're required as part of your grant application, the grants.gov website, I think, does a pretty nice job of walking you through and helping you put everything together. So I'm going to put on the screen an example from grants.gov. Now, again, this is taken from from Minnesota, and they were nice enough to share theirs with us so that we could share it with you. But after you've completed everything, and I see that I'm on page 4. Oops. I'm going to go up to the top here. Okay, so after you're done, you pretty much have everything that you need. So it gives you the forms that you have to complete that correspond with what you saw in the solicitation notice. So all of these forms, you probably have to fill them out. You're probably going to have to, I mean, if you were me at Nebraska, you'd probably have to go find somebody that knows the answers or has completed one of those forms before. But again, like I said, it really does a pretty good job of walking you through what you need. So again, the list of forms, buttons to save and submit, check for errors, and then the application. And all of the applications are kind of included in a like format here. And this is just an example again of one that previously submitted by Minnesota. But notice it says SF 424. That's your first application.
Laura,
as you go down and
clicks, please. Sorry
Pardon?
to interrupt. Can you zoom in a couple of clicks?
Oh, I'm very sorry.
That's okay.
Thank you for. Got it. Okay. I'll just page up again. Okay, I've zoomed in, and I went back to the top of the application, so that you can kind of see it. This is what you get after you've walked through the grants.gov website, which I thought was very nice that you would be able to get what you submitted back, like in this PDF document. So. And probably you couldn't see this very well before. I'm sorry about that. But look at you have the list of mandatory forms, optional, and other attachments. Now remember, I showed you the list of things that that you'll complete, that you'll write. Those will go in as the other attachments. And just stop me if this. I don't know if you guys know this, but I'm in Nebraska and I'm kind of in the middle of nowhere, and we're in a storm. So I'm half expecting the internet to drop any time, but so if I lose you, I'm sorry. But so at the top you say SF 424. That's your initial application, and then it just walks you through everything that you have to complete. And as you come down, you get to the additional online forms that you can complete. And then, there's certain things that you have to do as just by virtue of the fact that you're applying for federal assistance. But okay, so for instance, here's an EPA key contacts form. It literally just walks you through what you have to do. Okay, now look at this. Here's budget information for non-construction programs. This is actually one of the forms that you fill out if it's applicable. And notice it walks you through. This is the federal amount and the total that they applied for. Here's where you see some personnel, fringe benefits, travel. If you recognize the stuff under personnel, this column to the far left, it pretty much follows what they've listed in the grant guidance. And here's something that may or may not challenge you. It would have me, I think, is the in-kind assistance. The different types of indirect assistance that you may have to try and figure out or find out who knows about that. And a lot of times there's a budget person from your agency that you can work with to get this. But for instance, here's an indirect rate of 20.05%. All of this stuff is important to the grant. It's just things that you may have to do some legwork to find. But this is, okay, down at the bottom it says this is 424A. So it's really walking you through, and I'll look for another reference. That's a budget form. But these forms, once you've completed them, they all look like the PDFs you would have either completed by hand. Like here's one, 5700-54. Again, one of the forms on that list that is part of the grant application package. So anyway, I just thought it would be useful to show this to you in case you haven't seen it before. But usually in all of these forms, there's some place for somebody to sign. And so this particular grant application was 17 pages long. And then I'm scrolling back up to the top here. So there's also a place in the grants.gov website where you would submit your attachments. And I think I saw, yeah, here it is. There's various add attachment buttons for the things that you need to submit your project narrative, your cover letter, and that kind of thing. But I think if you just follow what they have at grants.gov, you should be all right with submitting that. So I want to thank Minnesota for letting us share that with you. I also included a list of your regional contacts. Your regional contacts for the Exchange Network could be very valuable in helping you find someone, if not within your agency, within a sister agency in your state that can be very helpful to you. They also may have answers to questions that are hard for you to find. So, I mean, I think these guys would be a really good resource for you if you get stuck on something to give them a call. And they want to award this money, so they're there to help you. It's, you know, they want to give it to you. So anyway, I encourage you to contact them if you need to. And with that, I don't have anything else, and I'll do my best to answer your questions.
Laura, we've got one question from Sagai in Region 8 asking who can apply or submit a proposal for these grants.
Sagai, thanks for your question, and I believe EPA regions are not eligible, but state agencies, for the most part, I believe it's at least for SDWIS prime transition, we're looking at primacy agencies. If you're again, if you're two agencies within a state, you would want one agency would be eligible for the grant. I'm sorry, one agency would be eligible for a grant that covered CMDP and SDWIS prime transition. You might have another agency that has a grant for another EPA program. If you do a partnership grant, one agency has to be the lead agency. Tribes are eligible to apply. I didn't really cover tribes because there's an intertribal consortium document and some other things specific to tribes. I don't think EPA regions or EPA DI programs are eligible, though. It would just be state primacy agencies.
Those are all the written questions that have been submitted. If anybody else has a question, please submit that here in the next few minutes. Laura, thank you very much for sharing this information. It was an excellent presentation. And again, I wanted to remind everybody that the group that's presenting to you today is the ERG SDWIS Prime Transition Team, a group of 3 companies that you're all familiar with that have provided service and solutions for your agencies. And we have collected a bunch of information, including what we've presented to you today, and we're presenting it on our website, which can be reached at SDWISprimetransition.com. So please take a few moments to peruse that website. If you can think of any questions outside of the time of this meeting, there is contact buttons on the top and the bottom of that website. Again, SDWISprimetransition.com. I'll type it in the chat here. And feel free to submit a question or comment to us there. Not seeing any more questions in the chat now, Laura. If you'd like, I can open the floor up to everybody. Maybe there's some spoken questions in lieu of written questions.
Hey, Jesse, we could do the raising of hands. That may be easier.
Yep. Along the left margin of your GoToTraining toolbar, there's a little hand icon. If you press that, we'll know that you'd like our attention, and we'll be happy to unmute your line and speak with you. Okay, for those members of your primacy agency that were not able to make this meeting, again, we did record it, and we will make the recording available on our website. So please follow up there at SDWISprimetransition.com. And we thank you very much for attending our meeting, and we look forward to helping you along the way. Short time window to get this proposal submitted on time by November 18th, but please don't hesitate to contact us. We're happy to help.
One more thing, Jess. Sagai asked about the Region 8. Sagai, I would contact that coordinator that was on the list to find out if you are eligible for the state of Wyoming. And Jonathan Haynes just put in there that how many active EN grants can your state have open at one time? Great question. The answer is 4. You can have 4 grants open at one time, and that's the most you can have.